You're listening to WWDB AM Talk 860. Life can only be understood backwards, but it must be lived looking forward. At the intersection of justice and community is The Looking Forward Show. And now, here's your host, Jeffrey Abramowitz.
Welcome to the Looking Forward Show on WWDB AM Talk 860. It's Jeff Abramowitz here, and another great episode. We have a rocking great show for you today. I'm super excited with our two guests that are going to be on. And before we get there, that's my teaser. Before we get there, I want to just mention Looking Forward Show is a show where justice meets community. And we've been on the air for a number of years. We recently found our new home at WWDB AM in Philadelphia, Talk 860. You can reach the Looking Forward Show at lookingforwardshow@gmail.com. If you want to be a guest, reach out. If you want to be a sponsor, reach out. Let me know if you have something you want to get off your back and talk about that intersection so important of the criminal justice world and what's happening today and how it relates to our community and the great things that are happening across the country. So just to give you a brief, we're really excited about going forward. We've reached our new home. We also have a new production team coming on board. You can also be listening to us and watching us on many of your favorite podcasting venues. I hope you'll check that out. And again, we are a place where, the reality for many people in the country today is that with 2.1 million people incarcerated in our country, we just need to do a better job understanding where the holes are that we need to fill and fix in our criminal justice system. And as people navigate the system and come home, there are so many stories of people doing wonderful work and changing the world. And we want to highlight them. We want to give them voice. We want to give them an opportunity to share their awesomeness. And that's what the Looking Forward Show is all about. So my name is Jeff Abramowitz. I'm the host of the show. And I've had the show for about 5 years now. And we've, as I said, recently transitioned to WWDB. But part of the show and the success of the show has really been telling the stories of those people who are doing great work in the field and have some successes to share. And we're going to be doing that today with two wonderful guests. You're going to be hearing from Brandon Brown as well as Rich Bevans from Baker Industries. And both have remarkable stories to share with us. So we hope that in the future, if you want to be a guest on the show, it's super, super easy. Just send me an email, lookingforwardshow@gmail.com. And we'd be glad to respond and get you on the calendar. Super simple. So I wanted to say this. Yesterday was an important day. For me, it was Martin Luther King Day. And I had a chance to celebrate here in Philadelphia by participating in an event that people were packaging material, useful material that could be used for men and women that are incarcerated and coming home. Things like socks and feminine products for women, a whole bunch of different items that could be used for people that are transitioning through the justice system. And it was really great, but I was super mindful because, as some of you know, I was a lawyer for a long time and made some bad choices in life that ended up putting me into a federal prison for 5 years. And one of the most impactful things of that journey was a saying that I read that Martin Luther King had in his unbelievable words. He had a line that went something like this: in the end, we remember not the words of our enemies, but the silence of our friends. And I thought about that so many times during the course of my stay away. And as I came home, Martin Luther King, just an amazing orator, and taught me the meaning of words and how impactful words can be. And our first guest who I want to introduce is Brandon Brown. And Brandon has taken words and actually put them to visual meaning. I met Brandon down in Atlanta at the NCHEP conference, which is for Conference for Higher Education in Prisons. Brandon, how are you? Welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks so much, Jeff. I'm doing well. It's an honor to be here and just always looking forward to being part of the work and the great things that you guys are doing down there.
Well, I have to tell you, I'll tell you a little bit about how I met Brandon, and then you're going to tell us a little bit about Brandon. But I met Brandon at a conference, and the first thing that struck me was a prison cell door that was standing next to him at the time. And I'm like, seriously, dude, what are you doing standing next to a prison door? And how did you get the door to begin with? And Brandon went on to tell me the story of how they got it. And I'm not going to ruin his story for you, but Behind the Door, and Brandon also has a Behind the Door podcast that he does with Jeremy Hiltz and Want to encourage you to check that out because I know it's just awesome. I've had a chance to listen to some of the episodes. But Brandon, tell our audience a little bit about Brandon Brown.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll first start just by kind of like adding to the plug there for anybody who's listening. Check out Behind the Door podcast on all major platforms: Google Podcasts, Apple, Spotify. I believe, and although my point of view is a little bit skewed because this is one of my favorite projects that I've ever been a part of, but I believe that what we're doing is really important and matters, and the stories that we're telling are stories that often go untold and unheard, and they're the stories that I think can really change the way that people view our system for the better. But as far as me, like you said, Jeff, my name is Brandon Brown, and I'm calling in from the state of Maine. I for the most part grew up here. It's I moved around a lot as a kid, but the longest period of time that I've gotten one place is in the state of Maine, specifically within the Maine Department of Corrections. When I was 21, I committed a crime and was subsequently sentenced to 27 years in prison with all but 17 years suspended. So I spent the ages of about 22 to 35 inside of the Maine Department of Corrections, and then was able to transition home on a supervised community confinement program where I finished the last 2 years of my sentence in the community, and really took it upon myself to embed my professional work in the realm of criminal legal reform, doing everything I could to get people to see the humanity that exists within our prisons, but also to get young people not to repeat the mistakes that I made when I was a reckless young man. But the biggest part of my story really revolves around the idea of education, and I think that's an important thing to highlight because I had the pleasure of meeting you in Atlanta a few months ago at the National Conference on Higher Ed in Prison, but that wasn't by any means my introduction to the P.D. Green Foundation. I actually myself became a P.D. Green certified tutor many years back when I was serving my time in prison and working on my undergraduate college degrees. But for me, education was a pathway to envision a future when I was in prison. I came in at the age of 21 doing a pretty extreme prison sentence. Nearly 20 years is what I was sentenced to. And my first, weeks and months inside of a prison, there was no light at the end of the tunnel. I came in at the age of 22, and the thought of doing 17 years in prison was just something I didn't think there was any chance that I'd make it out alive. But I got very, very lucky and blessed that Doris Buffett, who's Warren Buffett's sister, had a Sunshine Lady Foundation that 9 months into my incarceration actually began to fund my college experience. And so the shortest version of the story is that I took my very first college class ever while I was incarcerated. And fast forward about 12 years later, I took the last class towards my PhD while I was also incarcerated. And the reason that that's special is because I was the first person in the state of Maine to get a master's degree while incarcerated. And although that's a really great achievement, it's something I'm really proud of. It's also really sad to say that in 2018, nobody in the history of our state had ever earned an advanced degree while they were incarcerated. So I was really happy to kind of bust that door open.
Well, you got to stop there for a second because if you were like in a studio right now, you could just drop the mic and walk out the door because that's kind of amazing. Yeah. So how hard was it? Like I did 5 years away. So the idea of doing a long stint as you did, and really just understand the challenges of education behind the walls. I mean, just doing a paper in a college class is difficult enough because, it's not like you have computer access all the time and you're often doing it on those old typewriters with the little ribbons that go around and, you have to hunt and peck and kind of make sure that you're not missing any letters and things like that. How difficult was it to actually pursue education inside the Maine DOC, Department of Corrections?
Yeah, it's a great question because during my time, I actually saw the evolution of how difficult it can be versus, how easy it can be to pursue the education. And like you said, when I started off in 2010, working on, my first college semester in my life, we were handwriting papers, right? Paper and pen, which means that I would do about 10 handwritten rough drafts before I handed in my final paper because you didn't want to hand in a paper with scribbles and scratches on it. And so, it would take me 10 hours to do my first 9 drafts and then probably another 10 hours to do my final draft because I wanted it meticulous and neat and I wanted everything to look good. And then we went to word processors like typewriters and, like semi-digital word processors where you would type it out and you'd see it on a little tiny screen and before you press enter and it would print. And then eventually, a couple of years into my sentence, my time in college, we had a computer lab where we had PCs and we were saving our papers on 3.5-inch floppy disks and bringing them to an educator to print off. Eventually, around the time that I was finishing my bachelor's degree, about 8 years into my incarceration, we got a grant, in the Maine Department of Corrections. And I don't remember exactly who the grant was from, but to fund word processors, but laptops, right? So like actual laptops that every college student would be assigned with no connectivity whatsoever. It was just for, having Microsoft Word and all the basic word processing, programming on the computer to be able to type our things back in our cells. And eventually, when I, had requested permission to pursue a master's degree, at the time in the prison that I was in, nobody had ever done any type of online learning. It just wasn't allowed. For an inmate to be on the internet was like the scariest thing that anybody had ever heard of. But in doing my research, there was a policy that allowed for it. So, I was very lucky that we had a somewhat progressive warden at the time. And I was able to kind of frame up that, hey, I'm going to get my master's degree no matter what, whether you say I can or not. It's just about whether you're an ally or an adversary in that process. And that's a story that I'm going to tell one day. And so when I got admitted into George Mason University's master's degree program, at that point, we had to kind of create the structure of being on the internet and what that would look like. And one of the stories that I tell often is that I did my entire master's degree online and I was allowed 6 hours a week of internet access to do that program. And you can imagine that, high schoolers probably do, 16 hours a week minimum online to research, their classwork and find the tools they need to help them. And, I think the resilience that prison built within me was what made it possible for me to figure out a way to do 6 hours a week online and still complete my master's degree program. But that evolution of starting with handwritten papers and ending in a program where I was actually on Blackboard and participating in discussions with students around the world is a really special evolution for me.
Brandon, honestly, though, this is the exception and not the norm in our country.
100%.
Maine is one of the few states, and I do this work across the U.S., is one of the few states in the country where they are progressive, that they allow that access. And in fact, Maine has, in the last few years, opened up open internet so that inmates and people that are incarcerated can actually go on and they can access the internet online and pretty relatively freely. There's restrictions on what they can access, but they can get online there. And I've been with some of the leaders of the charge in Maine from the Department of Corrections, and they're being viewed as the model across the country. And really, it's an amazing thing to see. One of the first things we task people with when they come home from prison and jail is to find a job, or and if we don't do more to educate men and women that are justice impacted and help prepare them, do what you do. Go and take those classes and learn so you come home, you're prepared for your next journey, next chapter in life. But Maine is definitely the anomaly, and it's amazing. What would you say? Like, there's a lot of people that listen to the program that are justice impacted, and we hope that some of this gets in behind the walls as well. But what is it that you could say to them that would encourage them or share what motivated you to kind of make this move? You're incarcerated for a pretty long time, and all of a sudden, like, what was it that went off in you that said, I can do this, I can make this change?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I was thinking about it when we first started. And I can tell you that for me, the catalyst that was pushing me forward in my education and my ability to kind of like dream and what my future could be despite being incarcerated for a lengthy period of time was the fact that I really did have a supportive community, both inside and outside. And that community was multidimensional. It existed with my family and some of my friends from before I went to prison, but it also started to exist within my teachers and the college professors who were coming in and treating me like a human every day and making me see my potential beyond just being a violent criminal, which is what, the system and society had labeled me as. But then also establishing a community of learners inside of the prison that were guys that I could relate to. We could talk about things other than the prison politics. We could talk about things other than our crimes and our street reputations and all these things that we assign value to when you have the absence of like that intellectual community. And so, I saw the evolution of the college program really change the culture of the facility, because guys started having different conversations and caring about different things. And then I got a hunger and a thirst for learning, because I realized that learning was a pathway for me, not just to distract myself from, the terrible circumstances that I was in and the dehumanizing effects of prison, but it also expanded my worldview and made me realize that I really can do a lot of things beyond this if I learn how to tell my story in a really effective and positive way. And that experience has been the foundation of everything that I've done, moving through my incarceration and coming into my reentry the last 2.5 years. But it really boils down to the fact that I experienced community at a pretty high level despite being in prison. And I think that's why your show is so important, to convince people that matters. People can realize their human potential when they have a community of people behind them telling them that it exists.
Yeah, and I think that's part of the show is a community that I refer to as not just the community on the outside, it's the community on the inside. Look, I had made some of my closest friends in the world are people that I served time with that taught me things that I would never have ever had an opportunity to learn. For example, I was with Santos, who taught me how to change brakes on a car and change the oil on a car, and someone else, Rodriguez, taught me how to drive a forklift and was masterful at it. Like all these skill sets that people had. I remember I taught a CDL class when I was in prison. I had never been in the cab of a tractor trailer before, but I knew there were guys there that were great at it, and I stood up and taught everybody what they needed to know to pass the test, and they stood right next to me telling them what they needed to know to drive the truck. And those were things that community was so impactful. I think there's also there's a humanity factor of all of this. For many people that are incarcerated, they've been beaten down all their lives and told they can't do it. They can't do it. And then you finally get into a place where, it becomes possible for you to get your high school diploma, for you to get your master's and go to college. And now with the Pell Grant window opening, it's made it even a little bit easier, but starting to recognize that these are all things that are possible going forward. Just want to give you a shout out. Just amazing. It's amazing what you've done and accomplished. And now that you've come home, it's taking all those lessons and telling your story, which is so darn impactful. And I really, truly struck home with me when I met you. But you've done more with it. Can you tell a little bit about to the audience a little bit about what's happened in your journey as you've come home?
Yeah, absolutely. And before I get into that, I just want to take one moment to say something that I think is really important. And I was recently back in the prison where I served the majority of my time, to talk about the power of a liberal arts education with the men who are enrolled in the college program. And you said a second ago that you really hope that this show makes it behind the walls and that there's a lot of directly impacted people who are listening in. And I made a realization recently, Jeff, that a lot of times, like even before when you were saying like, kind of shouting out the state of Maine for being progressive and allowing a lot of these things to happen and pushing the envelope on technology and what's capable of happening when we kind of open up these pathways and allow the prison to catch up to the real world. But I encourage the guys in the prison to never forget that a progressive administration is never the one who actually makes leaps and bounds forward, because a progressive administration is never the one who says, I think you should be able to learn, right? And for my case and for our case in Maine, and I think across the country, every time the prison system inches forward a little bit, it's because people in prison ask for it. And I think that's a message that I really want people to hear. We've had pretty good wardens and commissioners in the history of me being in the custody of the Department of Corrections. But at the end of the day, nobody came to me and asked me if I wanted to get a master's degree, right? That was never even on somebody's radar. It took me really believing that was a worthy cause and having people lift me up to say that I could find a way to do it. And then I went to the administration and said, I want to get my master's degree and there's got to be a way to do it. And if not for that, we wouldn't have the pathways that exist now. And I'm not taking credit for anything. I want to make sure that I note that, other than saying that I know education is worthy and I know education reduces recidivism. And I wanted to sell that point that if I'm continuing to try to better myself, you shouldn't limit me. You should open those pathways for me. So I just want everybody to hear that if there's something you want in your prison, if there's something you want in your state, your town, in terms of criminal legal reform, it's never going to happen until you ask for it and fight for it. And I encourage anybody that's listening to do that. But yeah, to come back to your question, I've been really, really lucky, Jeff. Education opened up every door that I could ever dream of. And as a result of getting my education on the inside, I've been able to teach college classes. I have 3 different universities in the state of Maine, and teach young people about crime narratives and about the way that narratives shape our social systems and the way that we marginalize people and the prejudices we have, and specifically how they shape criminal justice policy. And that's something that I became really passionate about during my time. I've been very fortunate to embed myself locally in a lot of prison advocacy work, and my hope has always been to wake up every day and inspire people who are still inside to know that their voice matters when they come home. And the project that I'm most proud of is the one we referenced at the beginning. It's the Behind the Door podcast, which is just telling real stories of real people, aimed at not only humanizing the experience of people who are in recovery from substance use, and experiencing homelessness and some of these other social woes, but also people behind those prison doors. Like you said, some of the most best and brightest and brilliant, compassionate people that I've ever met in my life are sitting behind those walls right now, and their stories aren't being told, and people just don't know how special some of our people in prison are. And I'd actually say the majority of our people in prison are just waiting for the opportunity to be great, but they need to be able to tell their stories of greatness for people to really believe it.
I love it. I love it. So we're going to take a quick break, a really quick break. This is the Looking Forward Show, WWDB Talk 860. And I want to, when we come back, we're going to talk about what was most impactful for me when I first met you. It was that darn cell door that captured us and captured me, and really made me leech right on and find out, what is this door doing here? But we're going to come right back. And you're listening to the Looking Forward Show. Jeff Browitz will be right back.
You've been listening to the Looking Forward Show on WWDB Talk 860. If you'd like to be a guest on the Looking Forward Show, or if you'd like to be a sponsor of the show, you can reach us at lookingforwardshow@gmail.com. This program is being sponsored in part by the PD Green Program. The PD Green Program provides education, tutoring, and support for men and women that have been touched by our justice systems. To reach or get more information about the PD Green Program, you can reach them at greenprogram.org. And now back to the show.
We are back, and we're talking to Brandon Brown. Brandon, I met you at NCHEP, the National Conference for Higher Education and Prisons Conference. I'm walking through the vendors hallway, and we had a table of the PD Green Program, which is a sponsor of this show, had a table right next to yours, and at your vending booth was this cell door, and it just captivated me for a lot of reasons. But the cell door itself had one story, and then the pictures that were around it that were enlarged, which you graciously gave to us to auction off at an event recently. But can you tell us about the door, and then what was the journey of the door?
I certainly can. So the cell door, Jeffrey's right. We, myself and my friend Jeremy Hiltz, are in possession of a real prison door, and it's so much more than a real prison door. It's actually the prison door that my one of my closest friends, Jeremy Hiltz, was incarcerated behind about 15 years ago. And the short story of that is, since being released in the last 15 years or so, my friend Jeremy has opened up the Recovery Connections of Maine and the Recovery Housing of Maine organization, doing recovery from substance use work with people in our community, in one of our most affected communities in Lewiston, Maine. And through that journey of creating this Recovery Connections of Maine, has established a relationship with our Department of Corrections up here. And so it's also gotten into reentry housing. And a couple of years ago, they started tearing down our medium security prison, one building at a time. And when Jeremy learned about that, he just, something in him said, man, in that prison, in the unit that I was in, was where I really started to change my life for the better, finally, after cycling in and out of the system for almost 20 years. And he just went out on a limb and asked the Maine Department of Corrections if he could have the door that he was incarcerated behind when they tore down the building that he was in. And at first the answer was no. It was like, I think that was just the natural reaction. Like, no, we're not going to give you a prison door. But Jeremy, through his patience and his perseverance, kind of sat on it and waited and reached back out. And eventually, the Department of Corrections, because of the relationship that they had with him and his ability to really lift people up coming into the community from incarceration, decided to actually gift him his prison door. And so, it's funny because I remember the day that my friend Jeremy got the door, and he called me and he was like, "You're never going to believe it, man. I got my door." And I was like, "What do you mean you got your door?" He's like, "They gave me my prison door." And I just remember the shock that I felt. Number one, I think I asked the same question that everybody asks, like, why in the hell would you want your prison door? Like all of the pain and suffering that happens behind those doors, and you want to be reminded of it and have that in your possession. But the more that we talked about it, the more we realized that for him, those doors symbolize some of the absolute worst moments in his life, but they also symbolize the moments where he finally decided that he wasn't going to be a victim of the system anymore. And he finally decided that he had had enough and that something had to change. And he did that inner work. And he started that healing journey from behind cell door 18. And so for him, getting the door was more of a symbol of hope than it was of oppression. And so we brainstormed about what could we do with this door to spread that message to people? How could we repurpose this door to give a message of hope to people inside, but also to expose the humanity of people inside to people outside? And Jeff, we came up with a really wild idea one night just sitting around the table, and it was, why don't we go to New York City with the door and just take pictures of it in the street and, just like juxtapose that door with things and places and people that are really commonly known to U.S. citizens. And what we ended up doing about 48 hours later was we put this 260-pound prison door in the back of his truck. We drove it down to New York City. We put it on the Valentino Pier in Brooklyn with the Statue of Liberty situated right behind it. And we took some pictures that we didn't know how compelling they were until we actually looked at them afterwards. And that juxtaposition of the cell door with the Statue of Liberty, which is the national symbol of freedom behind it, it just really, really spoke to us in a powerful way. And so the next natural progression in that was we got to put it in Times Square, just see what happens. And so we literally took this cell door, and about 10 o'clock on a Friday night with about 100,000 people in Times Square, we just put it in the middle of the square and we took pictures and videos. And what we realized in that experience was that 10,000 people walked by that door and not one of them saw it. And it made us really come to this visceral realization that that's mass incarceration and recovery in the United States of America. It's this really ugly problem that exists. And to us who have been victim of it, you can't ignore it, but to comment everyday people, it's not something that they want to look at. And so we realized that we needed to take this door and make it something that people were going to look at so that we could have conversations about what happens behind it for both sides. And we embarked on the podcast. And since starting the podcast, we've driven that door all over the country. We've been to Atlanta with it, where you encountered it. We've been to Washington, D.C. with it. We took pictures of the door in front of every national monument.
I want to stop you there. You just said it. I want to stop you there because the most impactful for me was in my journey. I had practiced before the U.S. Supreme Court in Washington before I'd gotten into some trouble. And the most impactful picture that I saw that was done was a picture freestanding of the door, and behind it is the Supreme Court of the United States. And it was such a trigger for me that I still think about it, because it really talked about, and to me was a message of what the court really needs to see, what every court needs to see, what everyone that's in the criminal justice sector needs to see, which is really the reality that the door symbolizes the men and women that are behind those walls, behind the doors, and telling their story. And there's a great line by Walt Whitman that I live by, and the quote is, "We should be curious and not judgmental." And getting people curious about behind the door, like what is it like in prison? What are the challenges that you face behind the walls? What are the challenges you face as you come home? And being able to tell that story. It's okay for us to talk about it, or even talk about it on a podcast or on a radio show. But when you see that door and you see it, juxtaposed with, the Supreme Court or in Times Square or behind, all these crazy places where you put it, it just makes it so real, and it brings it where, and I think the one thing you just said, which is so touching, was the fact that you had this in Times Square and people walked by it and didn't even notice it, like didn't even see it. But when you put it in the picture and you frame it and as part of a discussion, and you start really asking those questions, like, what is it like to be incarcerated? Gosh, what is it like to get your master's degree or your college degree inside of a prison? And what are the challenges you face? And then how did you do it? How can we make everyone do it? And how can we help people get that? It is one of the most impactful things that's happened that I've seen coming home. And that's why I was so touched by it all. And congratulations for like stepping up and doing it. Oftentimes we think of these great ideas and they're so far fetched that you just wonder, like, how do I even put something like this into motion? And kudos to you and to Jeremy for kind of making it real, making it happen. What's on the plate? What's on your plate for doing this in the future? Like, where is the door going to go? How far? By the way, congratulations! I know you recently had a daughter, and where are we taking the door, and what's the journey going to be like going forward?
Well, I can tell you, Jeff, that the journey going forward will be dictated by who wants the door and where they want it. And what we've realized is exactly what you just said. If I walk up to somebody on the street and I say, hey, can I have a conversation with you about criminal justice or prison reform? 9 times out of 10, the reaction is going to be, no, thank you, I don't have the time. But when I push a 260-pound prison door down the street, people walk up to me and say, what the hell is going on here? And I can say, well, let's have a conversation about these things. And that's what the door does. It went from something really ugly to a beautiful piece of art that prompts conversations that are otherwise nearly impossible to have. And so our dream and what we're looking to do in the near future is we're looking for some funding right now to bring the door to all 50 states, to link up with, organizations fighting for reform in all 50 states, to get them on the podcast, to facilitate conversations with normal everyday people in all 50 states about why this door matters so much and why the stories of the people behind the door matter even more than the door itself. And quite literally, we recently put wheels on the door because it was too much work to carry it up and down the streets. And so quite literally, the door has become a vehicle for social narrative change and criminal legal reform. And we want to take it wherever it can go. Our dream, hopefully we'll be able to fly that thing over to India one day and talk about prison reform in India and talk about it in China. And wherever we'll be welcomed is where we'll go with the door. And I think your reaction was the reaction that we're really looking for. We understand that there's countless millions of people in this country that have been behind that door and experienced all the negativity of it, and the power of them seeing the door free and mobile and being moved around as an art installation to prompt conversations about the humanity of people is exactly what we want to do with it. So we're just going to keep chasing this dream as far as it can take us, and hopefully move the needle a little bit towards humanizing people in prison and allowing others to see their potential.
Just amazing. Brandon, if our listening audience, well, they want to get hold of you guys, like if they want the door or they just want to learn more about the project or the podcast, how can we reach you?
Yeah, so I would say the easiest way to reach us is to follow us on Facebook or Instagram. On Facebook, you can find us at Behind the Door, and on Instagram, it's Behind the Door Maine. Or I'm going to just put my personal email out there. It's healingisjustice3@gmail.com. And if you're interested in the door or the story, or you've got an idea of where we should bring the door, send us a message on social media, follow us, download on Apple Music, Spotify, Google Podcasts, but email me, and we'd be more than happy to work out the details of where we can bring this door next to generate some more powerful stories for people to hear.
Absolutely amazing. Brandon Brown, thank you so much for being a guest on the show. I look forward to taking the door and places that I travel and getting your story out there. But congratulations on just a amazing story. And you're kicking it and you're doing it and you're making change happen. And you're really telling the story of the stories that need to be told. So I appreciate you, and hoping everybody will reach out, follow the Behind the Door podcast in the future going forward. Brandon, congratulations on everything, your accomplishments and achievements going forward. And I look forward to having you here in Philadelphia and all the places where the PD Green program is doing some great work. So again, thank you so much, and good luck going forward. You've been listening to the Looking Forward Show on WWDB AM Talk 860, and we're going to be right back in a short break with our next guest, a good friend, Rich Bevan from Baker Industries, and we'll be right back.
You've been listening to the Looking Forward Show on WWDB AM Talk 860. If you'd like to be a guest on the Looking Forward show, or if you'd like to be a sponsor of the show, you can reach us at lookingforwardshow@gmail.com. This program is being sponsored in part by the PD Green Program. The PD Green Program provides education, tutoring, and support for men and women that have been touched by our justice systems. To reach or get more information about the PD Green Program, you can reach them at greenprogram.org. And now, back to the show.
We are back at the Looking Forward show, and just amazing. Again, Brandon Brown, Behind the Door podcast. You want to check it out. Our next guest today is, I call him a friend, and I use that word. I take it so seriously ever since I've been away, because there are not many people that actually walk the walk when it comes to helping men and women that have been incarcerated and gone through the justice system, and others that face challenges, physical challenges and disabilities. And Rich Bevan from Baker Industries is somebody that I've looked up to and admired for all the great work he does. And thank you, Rich, for taking some time for us today. How are you, my friend?
Jeff, it's great to be with you. I appreciate the invitation, and I'm doing great. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you, and thank you so much. I remember, you may not or may, I remember the first time that I met you. It was at an event, and you were talking about the work that Baker Industries does, and I was like, this sounds pretty good. And then I went back, and I'd been doing some reentry work in Philadelphia, and I had a few friends, actually one person in particular that needed a job, and she was a secretary or did some secretarial work. And I said, Lizette, I think you need to call Rich and see if you can get a job. I know they're looking for some help. And Lizette ended up calling you. She called me back an hour or two later, and she said, this guy, Rich, said he's going to meet with me and he's going to interview me. He says, I might have a job. And it turns out not only did you hire her, but I know she did some work for you over time. But I just like anybody that not only just talks it, but just walks the walk. I thank you so much. You have had such an impact on me and on countless numbers of people that have been justice impacted. First, if you could tell us a little bit about Rich Bevan and the work that you've done at Baker Industries, I think that set the stage properly.
Thanks again for having me, Jeff. My name is Rich Bevan. I'm the president of Baker Industries. I've been with Baker in that role for about 7 years and on the board for over 10 years. And Baker has been in our community. This is our 44th year of operation. Started by a couple of entrepreneurs in the Philadelphia region, Charles and Louise Baker, who had a son with disability who couldn't find paid work. And like true entrepreneurs, they decided to create a solution. Quickly attracted a lot of disabled adults into their program, but has the vision to expand beyond just disability to adults that have all kinds of challenges getting off the sidelines and back into the workforce. Of course, that includes returning citizens. It includes folks who are in a homeless situation or housing unstable, and it includes folks who are struggling with recovery. All of those populations we serve today, about 200 folks a year get a paycheck from us every year, working in a regular work environment, doing real work for real local customers, and getting a real paycheck. All in the supportive, trauma-informed manner that we try to provide with folks who are making that difficult but critical step to get back into the workplace.
It's an incredible place. So I remember my first time I went to see your plant in Philadelphia, and I walked in, and all of a sudden I see these boxes from big companies, and you're doing packaging, and it's this huge, gigantic warehouse. So you took us about a half-hour tour of your facility, and you showed us all the wrapping and packaging, and everyone that was there, they were all people that had been justice impacted or touched by the justice system, and they were all working together and kind of in a really incredible way because so Baker Industries is a company that actually does they hire people that have different between disabilities and different challenges in their life. They're coming home, but you're actually giving them a job and a paycheck, which is remarkable in and of itself. But you're doing much more than that because you're also helping them transition. And what I found most intriguing about Baker was that you really met people where they were and realized it wasn't just about doing a job. It was about learning how to survive in society. and you integrated all of those life skills that people need coming home to really find their way and their path. So tell us about the Baker model. Like what's made it so successful for all these 44 years?
Well, a couple of things I think work for us well and have proven to be helpful to folks in need of work and need of opportunity. The first is that we really are a no judgment zone. But once you join Baker, you're part of the Baker team. Whether you join us with disability, whether you join us because you're justice involved, whether you join us because you're homeless or struggling with substance use disorder, you become part of our team, work side by side with individuals with often very different challenges. That creates a very empathetic and caring community at Baker. We work together to get jobs done, and folks learn quickly how to collaborate, how to take some direction, how to be accountable for their results. And that real work environment is another key differentiator for us. This isn't made up work or training work. Real customers are using our products, and they're often products that show up on the shelves of Philadelphia stores a few weeks after we are able to package them and prepare them. And then lastly, we do provide, as you know, Jeff, a number of life skills, coaching and training opportunities. We have a job readiness program. It's a cycle of 12 weekly workshops focused on a range of professional and personal development skills. We do day-to-day coaching, both one-on-one and on the job floor. And folks get ultimately what I would describe as a caring, supportive, real work experience that often is really a great next step for them as they're coming back into the regular workforce.
So Rich, there's a few things I want to say. First is that you just don't do this for Baker. I mean, you're an advocate for this type of transitional employment for people. The one thing I hear going across the country and doing this work is that from employers in particular is we can teach someone to do just about anything in our plant. We can teach them how to work a machine and operate a machine. We can teach them how to do certain tasks. The one thing we can't teach people is how to be on time. We can't teach them how to wear their pants so their butt crack isn't showing, or how to deal with conflict in the workplace, or how to, all these little things that actually make an employee successful. And those are the things that become your priority, is really teaching people everything from looking someone in the eye to how to do a proper handshake, and how to really work their time management so they know how important it is to be on time. For employers that are out there, what's the messaging? Like, what do you want them to know about the people that are transitioning or have challenges that they're facing, and thinking about engaging in this talent pool in the workplace?
Well, Jeff, we work with employers across the region every day, every week. And one of the key messages we communicate is there's an enormous amount of untapped talent in populations that have been sidelined from the workforce. And certainly includes the many, many thousands of folks who return to the Philadelphia region every year who've been just as involved. So you've got a deep talent pool with folks who are very resilient, very focused on their next opportunity. And what we try to do is get folks ready for that real opportunity. And as you note, a lot of that comes down to sort of the soft skills and the kinds of behaviors that we define as just being a good employee. It's not about a technical skill set. It's not about a specific type of training. Folks can learn that, as you point out, but really learning about timeliness, around responsibility, accountability, good communication, good teamwork. Those are the things that we think all employers welcome. Last year, we had 55 folks leave our program and progress to better job opportunities. And I can tell you they went across every industry you can imagine, from manufacturing to healthcare to retail to hospitality, because that common feature of being a good employee translates everywhere.
Just amazing. I have to tell you a story. So you have more than one facility. You have one in Philadelphia. You have also one in Chester County, correct?
Yes, correct. In Malvern, yep.
I went out to see your Malvern facility, and there was a young man that was working at a table, and he had apparently had a disability that he was dealing with, but he was actually doing something, and he was looking at slides, at glass slides, and he was checking these glass slides, and he was checking them for imperfections. And I remember this so vividly because I remember him looking up as we were making the tour, and I was looking there and asking him how a question it was going, and he was concentrating on what he was doing, and he found a bad slide, and he pulled the slide out. And honestly, it was as if he had just won the Super Bowl. Like he had just accomplished something that was so amazing and super important things. Those slides are being used, in the medical field, and to catch one that has a flaw in it is something that would possibly identify as or misidentify something that's being read by a doctor or physician or doctor. And he took such pride in what he had done, and it stuck with me so much. I remember is one of the most impactful things that's happened to me since I've been home was watching the smile on his face. And the only thing I could compare it to was I was at a place called Edwin's in Cleveland, which is a 5-star restaurant that Brandon Chaskowski is a good friend of mine runs. And Brandon, we went there for dinner one night, and a gentleman came up and made dessert that Brandon had sent over, and it was bananas Foster. And, he lit the banana Foster on fire as, you do traditionally. And I will tell you that I snapped a picture by happenstance because I wanted to get the meal, but I actually got his picture. And he had this amazing smile, but it was the same exact smile of the young man who caught that slide. It was as if he had just won the biggest prize you could possibly ever win with just such pride. And there's something so invaluable about that and the impact that it has. And I know you and I have talked recently because I know you're about to go on your next chapter of life and step down from as president, although you'll be active in the organization, I'm sure. But I wonder, did you ever give a thought to how many people you've touched over the years that you've been doing this, and wonder where they are in their journeys?
Well, the reason I got involved with Baker was that very point you just made, Jeff. I knew how I felt when I got my first real job, and that feeling of, opportunity and a purpose and being validated. And Baker's core message that there's real value in work, in real work for everybody, has really sustained us through the whole 44 years, and it never gets old. And that feeling of pride, of doing a good job, of contributing, of being productive is a real core human need, we believe, and probably the most important insight that the Bakers had when they started Baker continues to be the most important insight today. We've had over 12,000 people come through Baker Industries in our 44 years. It's a big number. I've been lucky to be there for a small part of that. But if you look at the whole journey, Baker continues to impact, as you say, a lot of lives, and nothing makes us happier than having someone stick their head in the door at the end of a workday who's checking back in with us, who's left us a year or two ago, taken on a new job. It's going well. Maybe they've gotten a promotion. Maybe they've been able to afford a new apartment or a new car, and they're stopping by and saying, "Hey, I just want to let you know I'm doing well, and I appreciate the opportunity I had here." That's our best moment of the year when that happens, and we're lucky it happens, happens frequently.
I want to flip this on 2 points. One is if you're an employer out there and you want information on how this model really works, you need to reach out to Baker Industries and Rich, because they do little things that really, they're years and years of experience. One other quick story that I had was, I remember you had this room and this office that was tucked on the side, and it was a safe place for employees and for them to go to during the day if they needed some time for themselves, or to get some counseling, or to talk to a staff or a mentor or somebody on site. And those little things that employers can do that can really go a long way to making sure that they understand the challenges of people that are coming home, and how to work with people that are just as impacted. Because sometimes it's as simple as asking the question, do you have work boots your first day of work? Or do you have a place you can deposit your check? Because they may not have a bank account. Or, do you have a cell phone? Or how are you getting to work the first day? Like all those questions that, they need to be asking along the way. If people wanted information on Baker Industries, how would they go about getting that?
Well, we'd be delighted to talk to anybody who wants to learn more. We have a day one checklist we use with both our participants and their employers that touches on those very issues, and it might give employers some real assistance in ensuring a smooth and successful transition. www.bakerindustries.org is our website. Our contact information is on there. You can certainly reach out to me personally, Rich Bevan at bakerindustries.org. And we'd be delighted to be able to assist any employer in understanding how to successfully tap into this deep talent pool of justice-involved individuals in our city.
So that's one aspect of this is the employment piece of it. But there's another aspect of this that I want to touch on, which probably doesn't get part and parcel of some of the interviews that you give, which is actually getting manufacturers to understand that they have this resource that's available to them, that they're going to get unbelievable quality product and getting it packaged, getting it distributed, and all the unbelievable things that you guys do in that process, in that manufacturing process. And if you're a manufacturer out there, or if you really need to get your product out there, whether it's put together and putting all the different pieces of the puzzle together for a product, or getting it packaged, getting it mailed. I mean, you do so many different things. You need to reach out to Baker and really understand that there's a resource out there that you could get some really high quality last minute manufacturing, production, and distribution work done. And I'm wondering, how do you go about getting some of those customers, and what would you say to people that maybe in line to using your services?
Thanks for bringing that up, because we do real work, and we do work on behalf of usually 40 or 50 companies across the region every year. Packaging work, mailing work, warehousing, distribution. We compete every day, Jeff, with for-profit entities, and compete very well because we do a very high-quality job. So for any employer who's looking for, or any manufacturer who's looking for packaging services, mailing services, kitting services, you again reach out through our website. There's an info@bakerindustries.org where you can leave an email. We always track it and respond quickly. We have a sales leader at Baker who will get back to you right away, who can build a quote right away and see if we can be of help. Some of the companies we're working with currently, we're very proud to work with. Tasty Cake, great Philadelphia company. Scrub Daddy over in Pensacola, New Jersey. Crazy Aaron's Thinking Putty in Norristown. Dyad Enterprise and other healthcare businesses out in King of Prussia area. So all kinds of industries work with us, and we're delighted to consider your company if you're looking for some outsourced packaging services.
I love it. So, Rich, I'm curious. I know you'll be moving on eventually from your job, but I'm curious. There are so many stories that I think back on of people that I think I've touched or hopefully I've touched in the years that I've been doing this work, and I'm curious. Are there any of those stories that stick out in your mind that you go to bed and you just smile? You just say, "Man, we really did some good there." Any one of those you could share with us?
Sure. I think one of the most impactful experiences for me is working with individuals at Baker who are coming home after having been incarcerated for a very long time. And we have one individual I keep in mind, call him Mike for purposes of this broadcast, who came to Baker after about a 25-year prison sentence for a crime he had committed and served his time for. And really had not had regular employment for a very long time. Really committed to Baker and our program, became an excellent participant and worker in our program. And we were able to place him with a local manufacturer in North Philadelphia, who called us after about 4 or 5 months and said, "This guy is like our best employee. How many more Mikes do you have?" He would come back to stay in touch with us. Did very, very well there, eventually parlayed that job into a better job with another company. And when I think about the challenges he faces, the resilience he shows, the ability, the flexibility to make that successful transition, I was just proud to be a part of it and get to know him, to be honest with you. And I could keep going for a long time on this question, but we work with some really, really great people who come to us from difficult circumstance, but have incredible will, incredible toughness, incredible caring. And, again, I'm just proud to be associated with the folks we work with at Baker.
So I appreciate that. I think the other thing that we don't think enough about is, when men and women come home from incarceration, they've often been down for a period of time where, they really need some time to adjust, to understand, getting back into the community, getting back on their feet, getting back with their families, and having that first job, that first opportunity, that transitional job to help them find and understand where they want to go and what their next chapter is going to be like, is so important to them. And too often, criminal backgrounds just shut the door on people that are trying to get back on their feet just to make a decent wage to feed their families and get a roof and shelter over their heads. And I appreciate all the Baker has done to kind of set the stage for people and help them in that really, sometimes really difficult transition. If you want more information about Baker Industries, I definitely suggest get out, check them out. It's bakerindustries.org. Go on to bakerindustries.org and check it out. One last question before we go is, the secret sauce. If you had to talk to an employer today, and as I know you do all the time, what's the piece of advice that you want them to really take away when you talk about hiring men and women that are justice involved?
First of all, really make every effort to see everyone as an individual, because there's so much more that is common in our experience that is different. And certainly when you take the time to see folks as individuals, to think a little bit with some sensitivity and flexibility about what support they might need, a little investment on the front end can lead to many, many years of a great employee. By the way, that's a rule that applies to everybody, not just individuals who are justice involved, but it particularly applies there because folks often will see, as you know, a criminal record and immediately make a bunch of assumptions about somebody that are often very untrue and very limiting. So take the time to think about the person as an individual, what kind of extra support, flexibility they might need in the early days to make that transition successful. And you're often going to end up with a very loyal, long-term, successful employee.
I love it. And I mentioned earlier when we had Brandon Brown on earlier, we were talking about something similar about being curious. Be curious and not judgmental, and really ask those questions. What do you need to succeed? How can I help you do that? What are those things? And don't take anything for granted, from them having an identification when they come home and go to see you, to them being able to download a resume. Those are all things that, oftentimes are really challenging, and things that we don't think about as in the employment world. So, I want you to really be mindful and ask those questions that will help a person be successful going forward. Rich, I want to just thank you for everything you've done at Baker Industries, and for all the people that I know that I've sent your way that have been they've gotten their start back and well on their way to success because of the door that Baker's opened for them. So thank you to your entire team, and we wish you well in your next chapter. I know you're going to stay active with Baker, and I'm sure I'm going to see you all over in the workforce field. But if you're an employer out there, please don't hesitate. Check out Baker Industries and learn more about how they do it, what the magic sauce is, and magic trick is that they have for hiring and retaining talent that are justice involved, and working with men and women that may have a disability of some kind. So, Rich, thank you so much. You've been listening to the Looking Forward Show, WWDB AM Talk 860 on the radio dial, and we hope that you're going to join us in the future. If you want to get some more information on the show, if you want to be a guest on the show, lookingforwardshow@gmail.com, send us a note. We are all about where community meets justice, and we want to share some of the awesomeness that's going on across the country with people that are doing good work in helping those that have had some challenges in life and are getting back on their feet. So, Rich, thank you so much. Big shout out also to Brandon Brown. You want to check out his podcast, Behind the Door Podcast. And I want to give a shout out to our sponsor of the show, which is the PD Green Program. And for those that don't know, the PD Green Program is a national nonprofit that does educational tutoring both behind and beyond the walls of our prisons and jails across the country. We use college students to help individuals that are justice impacted get smarter so that they can find their career pathway to success. So You're listening to Looking Forward Show. My name is Jeffrey Bromwitz, and we're going to see you hopefully in the next show coming up soon. So again, you're listening to WWDB AM Talk 860, and this is the Looking Forward Show. Thanks, everybody.
You've been listening to the Looking Forward Show on WWDB AM Talk 860. If you'd like to be a guest on the Looking Forward Show, or if your organization would like to share an event that they have coming up, or if you'd like to be a sponsor of the show, you can reach us at lookingforwardshow@gmail.com. The Looking Forward Show has been brought to you in part by the PD Green Program. Founded in 2008, the PD Green Program supports the academic goals of men and women behind and beyond the walls of our prisons and jails. Since its founding, the PD Green Program has tutored roughly 16,000 students in over 50 correctional facilities and reentry programs across the country. They've recruited over 3,200 volunteer tutors from 30 universities and do work in over 14 states, including the District of Columbia. If you'd like to learn more about the PD Green Program, you can go to www.pdgreen.org. PD Green Program. Check it out. You can listen to the Looking Forward Show on the Looking Forward YouTube channel and coming soon on all of your favorite podcast venues.